battle lines are being drawn for a Christmas sales war between PlayStation and Xbox, but with the new models hitting the market, some experts fear we could be on the verge of effectively losing a generation of youngsters to the gaming world. Siobhan Robbins reports.
He's in control now, but there was a time when George Berberis spent up to 8 hours a day in a virtual world. He claims his addiction to gaming was damaging his reality.
I noticed changes in my behaviour with certain people, mood swings at the game, just getting angry over things that weren't really a big deal.
His hobby is easily accessible, and that's part of the appeal for people like George. He can stay indoors in one spot while competing against people around the world.
I'm in a team tack anyway with one space in it.
Popular mission-based games like Grand Theft Auto 5 can take days to complete, and the temptation to keep going can be overwhelming. Some experts warn the number of those addicted to gaming is likely to rise.
At the moment, if we estimated that there was maybe 1 or 2% of all the game-playing population, we're talking quite a large number. And at the moment, it's still got a bit of a generational sort of feel to it. You know, as this generation gradually move through, then other generations are going to come on behind, and I think the numbers are going to increase.
David Stannah's son Chris died after developing deep vein thrombosis. He spent most of the night on a console. His father's now campaigning for the industry to actively promote safe gaming.
It's very difficult to get the message across without a major campaign, and the point of delivery is right there on the game. That's the ideal place to do it. The people who are using the game see it, and they're the ones who are affected by it.
The new Xbox One and PlayStation 4 are expected to be popular Christmas gifts this year. And as the number of homes with consoles grows, so too will the calls to raise awareness of the potential physical and psychological risks of extreme gaming. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News.
Extreme gaming, is there such a thing? Joining us now, clinical psychologist Dr. Jay Watts. Doctor, welcome to you. Extreme gaming, is there such a thing?
Well, I think we have to be very, very careful. We've had 13 years of research into video gaming and the effects on the psyche, and we've just had this year the release of the new diagnostic International Bible, and the decision in that was actually not to include video gaming because the evidence isn't strong enough for that as a specific addiction as yet. At the same time, we know that for lots of behaviours, there's a real continuum between a bad habit, perhaps that society and parents especially cannot be keen on, and that can be mildly disruptive, right through to an addiction. And to that extent, anything can become an addiction.
Because presumably, if you are a little detached from reality, the opportunity to live your life even more vicariously through a video game will worsen a pre-existing condition.
Well, we have to be very, very careful because children tend to get very interested in video game normally around the age of sort of 8, 9, 10. Now, using fantasy and going into other worlds at that stage is very, very important. So we know kids have always done that through books, through creating dens, what have you. So the creation of a world and the immersion in the fantasy world is very important developmentally to kind of get a sort of sense of who one is, and especially who one is in comparison to a kind of ideal self. And what we find is that the games that are really, really popular are kind of opportunities to kind of test out ideal selves, you know, kind of more muscular versions of oneself, etc., etc. If that can happen for a certain period of time, perhaps a few years, and it doesn't affect functioning too much, and the child, the teenager comes out of it, well, brilliant. There's always going to be some parental and some societal disapproval of that. That's part of becoming a teenager. That's part of separating. But we do know that there are a kind of subset who get kind of locked into the fantasy world. And that can happen especially with video gaming because it is so attractive. It is so full of things that are kind of, you know, addictive and feel more exciting than the real world.
Some of those people who get locked into that subculture become very outspoken in defending it, and they make the point that actually, far from being sort of onanistic, this is something which is actually quite social. They're gaming with people on the other side of the world.
Absolutely. And what we have found is that there is a kind of sort of shift in that now the users of video games are increasingly becoming a little bit older. So it's moving away from the kind of stereotype of the kind of prepubescent boy. We've got far more women.
35.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got far more women using this technology, and that's partly linked with what you're saying. It's much more about multiplayers. Of course, there's a risk of cyberbullying if one doesn't want to be part of it, but it's far more communicative. And the games that sell again and again, they're games where there's really quite a kind of complex character development. And there are, even though there are some horrific cases, there are lots of research as well showing that use of this video games can improve visual spatial awareness. It can actually help with distraction because the best games tend to delay gratification, and that's a skill, of course, that all of us need to develop.
Speak for yourself. Okay. Dr. Watts. Excuse me. Thanks very much indeed. Jay Watts. And on Sky News for iPad, you can find out more about the symptoms of gaming addiction and the methods used to tackle it. The app is free for Sky customers. You do need to log in using your Sky ID. Well, it had little